What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Shredlord.
Jammin Jon.
And we have an album review for you. So one that was coming out on the week of the 24th of February that we definitely wanted to go over was the latest offering from Insomnium, Anno 1696. This again comes out on the 24th of February on Century Media Records. This band formed in 1997 in Finland, in a town that my ignorant American tongue could not possibly pronounce because it's Finnish. Finnish is difficult.
It's not a dialect that we dialect.
No.
Yeah.
It's just like a confusing word jumble with umlauts. But that's where they're from. This is their 9th studio album overall. The last time we brought them here was their Argent Moon EP, which was pretty much all of their softer side. Like, it was mostly acoustic stuff. So getting down to some actual heavy stuff was, kind of nice. And for those who don't know, this is Finnish melodic death metal, probably one of the most consistent melodic death metal bands out there in terms of the Finnish scene. These guys, consistently just put out solid melodeath. Lots of folky influences. Like, there's definitely stuff in here that is very similar to bands like Amorphous, Kalma, Dark Tranquility, and even Omnium Gatherum, which shouldn't be that surprising because they actually share some members. So getting into this one, as a longtime fan, I always kind of wonder, what they're going to sound like, because they've embraced more soaring epic melodies in the past. They've also been down in the dumps and just dark and melancholy as fuck. So I don't know, it's always sort of a mixed bag there. And this opens up, it opens up kind of long. Like, the opening track, the title track 1696, does take a while to get going. Like, you have a thumping drum, acoustic melodies, sort of grumbled vocals in the background, and it's like a steady build, but kind of takes a little while.
Takes 3 minutes, actually, to be exact.
Out of a 6-minute song.
It starts a little interesting too. It sounds like that Tibetan throat singing band The Who walked into the Wild Wild West. it was pretty interesting, to say the least.
It's like The Who were in Deadwood.
Yeah, but overall, you get a sense of how big this album sounds. It sounds absolutely huge. This band has 3 guitarists, keyboardist. There are multiple vocalists on here. You even have some guests on here as well, contributing backup vocals, and just this giant, lush production. But honestly, it doesn't come off as overproduced. This just sounds like it's a very big production. Everything kind of sounds like it was recorded in just a nice studio / concert hall.
And one of the interesting things that I noticed, especially in the front half of the album, because I feel like the front half of the album had songs in it that were just chock full of very lush production with many parts flying and soaring all at once. You still have that in the back half of the album, but I feel like the back half's maybe a little more straightforward and stripped down as opposed to the front. But I digress. What I was getting to is there's a lot of cool things going on in the background with just the faintest sound, like singing choruses, certain instruments, little melodies here and there, but they're just barely there. They're enough to be there for your ear to go, wait a minute, what is that?
Right.
But with everything going on, they did a good job of keeping them really back at bay, just giving a little to the ear. And I thought that was a clever way to keep everything from just jarbling together, because there's times when the drums are going, on either a little of a blast beat or a double bass escapade. There's just so much going on, so many hits from different instruments going on at the same time, vocals, effects on things, that it can get kind of hard for your ear to just navigate, but it does hold a lot of clarity by using that trick.
Yeah. Honestly, where I think all that really succeeds is a song like Starless Paths.
Yes.
Quite possibly, I don't know, it's up there with one of my favorite tracks on this album. This song is absolutely huge. Very much like an early In Flames sort of opening. It has this kind of bouncing groove, this really just kind of clever melodic death metal riff. But it's the way the song is constructed. There's a lot of cool peaks and valleys, lots of big soaring moments, lots of heavy chugging moments, almost some progressive flair to it occasionally in the transitions. Just absolutely monstrous.
Actually, I would state probably it's more progressive than one would think. The way it transitions, it goes from blackened to blasty and blackened to kind of calmer to almost a little bit jammy, and then you get some acoustic moments and
Mike Ockerfeldt would be proud.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is relatively similar to Opeth in some regards. Maybe not as long, because this song is 7 minutes, and if it was Opeth, it'd be 13 and a half. But it's how it's constructed. There are good swells of energy. You get good intense moments, kind of contrasted by calm, serene moments, and melody. lots of melody. This is, I would say, mostly a more melodic offering from them. Like, they've definitely been heavier in the past. It does have its heavier moments, but melody is almost the more central thing. Like, there's a lot of kind of major chordy sort of like happiness and bouncing, like a song like The Witch Hunter. It sounds ominous, the title. It's kind of just an upbeat, kind of hooky song. This is one where I think they use the 3 guitarist dynamic really well, because you have like a solid rhythm riff, an acoustic melody kind of on top of that, and like a lead melody on top of that with the synths. It's a really cool effect on the layering, and this was a good example of where they don't overcrowd things. Like, everything is in a nice set place. But the song overall, it kind of has like a little bit of that Devin Townsend sort of flair, where it's like, yeah, it feels positive and light and airy, even though the guy is growling his guts out and probably talking about something very depressing, because depression is kind of Insomnium's thing. But I don't know, it has just this sort of, I don't know, strange quality to it where it feels happy even though it's just down in the dumps.
And we even have some guest vocalists on here. Godforsaken has the, I do not know her name, once again, it is names that I cannot begin to pronounce. The wife of the keyboard player of the band Nightwish, if you're familiar with the Finnish power metal band Nightwish, one of the main guys, the keyboard player, it's his wife doing the introduction, and it's actually a pretty cool, very beautiful segue into this straight up double blast fiasco. And when the guitars kick in, everything is right and just carries the song the way it needs to be carried.
Yeah, this song is absolutely loaded with, again, like transitions that are just kind of all over the place. Lots of like more blackened elements. Like, the whole vibe of this album, actually this band, is sort of like wintry and cold. Yeah. Like, that's just their thing. I mean, it's Finland. It's it's winter there, what, 9 months out of the year at least?
So almost like Ohio. Not quite. Almost.
Right. Not Ohio right now. Ohio's really fucking confused when it comes down to the weather right now.
Ohio is off its medication right now.
Yes.
Again. And the song White Christ actually features Sakis Tolis from Rotting Christ.
You said Suckus.
Suckus? I don't know how to say his name. If I say Sakis, it's like you're talking about balls.
But if you say Suckus, it sounds like you're talking about sucking the balls.
It's all about the genitals, I guess.
You guys are dildos.
Anyway, he shows up to add some more sinister vocals to the song White Christ, which, honestly, it starts off like a good mid-tempo sort of rocker, but I think this song gets kind of hellishly repetitive. Like, it's just kind of hung on this one moment. Like, the choruses and pre-choruses kind of dominate it, and you do get a good alternating vocal flip between the two vocals, which, I mean, honestly, the main vocalist for Insomnium's got a good solid roar, and then Sakis, sorry, he's got a good, more sinister sound to him. I mean, Rotting Christ sounds fucking badass to this day, namely because his vocals are awesome and he's a great musician.
Are you sure it's not Dr. Zaius?
I don't think so. There's no doctor.
Okay,
I don't see that.
But you know how earlier when we were talking about, that they did a good job of not like overcrowding things? This song, unfortunately, I thought was a little crowded.
It was.
There's a lot going on.
And the riff behind it, I mean, it's a good riff, but it gets buried by, again, lush synths. It feels like layers of strings. There's maybe flutes in there too. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in that song.
But then, of course, there's the last song, The Rapids, which pretty much I think is a culmination of all the most awesome parts of this entire record. Starts off with this really kind of like creepy, cavernous atmosphere with some quiet piano, but then it just kicks in the door. Blast beats, there's a lot of riffs going on in this song. Definitely more aggressive, I think, than anything else on the record.
Yeah, I mean, there's some moments on Lillian that kind of have that classic melodeath sound in terms of, the riffs, but this song is darker. It's more sinister. There's more explosive sections, like you get lots of blast beats. The drums feel more intense throughout the entire song. Like, there's a lot of intense drum work in here, despite how, like, melancholy this album is. But this song in particular, they're just kind of going for, like, all the heaviness. Like, the energy on the song in particular is just a lot different. It just feels more just focused on just brutality in sections.
The Rapids was easily one of the best tracks on the album, and it was probably a good move to put it last, because it finishes very, very strong, and it almost leaves you wanting a little bit more at the end. So kudos to them for putting it last. There's also a very, very beautiful, haunting little guitar solo in there as well. There's a few nice leads, your traditional kind of well, I don't know how they do it in Finland, but in Sweden, you don't really have a lot of the, the Swedish melodic death metal. You don't have a lot of the traditional solos. You have a lot of really cool, strong melodies and guitar solos like that. And this definitely had a few, which I thought were good. This one, even on earlier tracks that I wasn't super crazy about, like that Godforsaken. And a track like White Christ, even though it's not one of my favorite tracks on the album, the lead on there was incredible, and it fit the song great.
Yeah. I mean, overall, this was a pretty solid listen. There are, like, some complaints I do. Namely, like, this album kind of took a while to get going. Like, not that the tracks were bad. It's just, man, there's, like, a lot of big buildups. Like, Godforsaken, while I love the really beautiful female vocals in there, they kind of hang out too long. And the opening track, again, the first 3 minutes of it is kind of an intro. And then you get into, like, a nice, raucous, more energetic song, but I feel like it's like, man, you spent a lot of time building it up.
Actually, a lot of these songs had a longer intro. Lillian had quite a long intro on it. Even the Rapids, well, I love the fuck out of that song. That intro took a minute to get going, too, and it was kind of like, maybe just kick in.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, like, having longer songs, you want to, like, space out moments, make sure they kind of land a hook, but leading them in, I think that is something maybe just spend less time on. Like, when you feel like the mood is already hit, like, all right, let's get going, let's get down to what we want people to remember these songs for.
My favorite moments on this album were when they would step away from the more power metal influences that sometimes show their face in this album.
In Finnish melodic death metal, like, Children of Bodom, I would even say, like, Winter Sun, there's always that little bit of, like, sort of power metal melody. Even Kalma's, pretty damn heavy out of those, but when they get more melodic, there's definitely, like, just like this little hint of power metal. Even Alexi admitted, like, yeah, we got a little bit of power metal in us.
And that's okay. Yeah. But I found myself, when they would get away from just throwing all these different things out there and these heavy super mixes to the more stripped down, where the riffs were carrying the song and the melodies were just blending very well. Sometimes there was too much going on, and while mix-wise it held itself together, it just wasn't interesting enough for me. I found that my ear followed it better when there wasn't 1,000 different things going on. And for my guitar-oriented mind, I could really latch my ear on to just those riffs kicking through and driving the song.
One of my issues with this is I feel like there is starting to be a little bit of overlap between Insomnium and Omnium Gatherum. Omnium Gatherum's thing is kind of generally more upbeat, like they play a lot more major chords and such, and at least when Insomnium came out with their new album, it was mostly more dark and sullen. Like, of course you have epic soaring parts and triumphant melodies every now and then. That's to kind of play off of the dark, sullen nature, but I feel like a good chunk of this is soaring. And it's not enough like the whole, miserable melancholy that Insomnium does so well. But overall, I thought this was a pretty solid listen. Like, this is another good one. I don't think this band really has a bad album, and I think that streak continues, because I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. This is a solid listen, great musicianship. It does take a while to really get going. Like, by the time you hit Starless Paths, like, this whole album kind of just takes off, and what a fucking awesome song. When they really get into, like, a cool mode of just, like, fun songwriting, like, these songs really fucking jump out. But, sometimes they kind of just hang on to, I think, what is kind of expected of them, and maybe just kind of stay in their lane a little bit too much. But overall, this is another good album. If you like, again, like Dark Tranquility and Omnium Gatherum, of course, you'll probably dig this.
I'm going to go ahead and give this a 3 out of 5. I thought this was a great listen. I have not listened to this band much at all, and I thought this was a good way to get introduced to them. You have a lot of different things going on here, and a lot of it was great. I think it just boils down to a little bit of stylistic preferences when it comes to how much I'm really going to latch onto it. And that's all it really boiled down to. Musicianship was excellent. The songwriting was great. My only real gripe is some of these songs could have been trimmed down a little bit, but from what it sounds like, that's kind of their thing anyway. So, once again, personal preference kind of thing. I think this is a fine album, and it definitely has a lot for a lot of different types of listeners, but for my first trip to Insomnium Land, I think it was a good trip.
I'm also on the 3 out of 5 star range. Much like Shredlord here, this is probably my first like full introduction to Insomnium. I've heard, I think, random tracks here and there, but not enough to be able to tell you like, oh, that's definitely Insomnium. I agree with pretty much everything everyone said at this point. It's a good record. The musicianship is definitely there. The songs are entertaining. Even the parts I didn't latch on to necessarily were like where it is more like melodic and upbeat. And I think we mentioned something earlier about gnomes running through a field. Like
when the Keebler elves are holding hands running through the forest.
Yep.
On a cold winter day, though.
It was entertaining. They're definitely good at what they do. Just again, from like more of a stylistic preference for me, I tend to hang on to things more like riff work and groove and things that I don't think this band is necessarily known for. But the couple things I did latch on to, mainly Starlift Paths and the Rapids, pretty much like the back half of the record. It was good for what it was. It just wasn't something that necessarily grabbed me. It was good. It was good. 3 out of 5.
Well, that brings us to the end of this review. And before we really wrap it up, I just want to give a shout out to my favorite Finnish guitar player, Alexi Laiho, rest in peace. Bad motherfucker, greatest guitar player from Finland, period. End of story. Fight me. And with that, thank you so much for coming down and visiting us here in Thralls Land. If you would hit that like button, and if you're not subscribed to this beautiful community which you've helped build, please do so. We'd love to welcome you in with open arms and cult-like stares.
Drink the Kool-Aid. Be one with us.
We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below where you will also find thrallsofmetal.com where you can get some of our merch. There's not a whole lot left, but we will soon be restocking shirts, and I think we're going to move in a slightly different path to get some more merch out to you. I know we've discussed many things, hats, grenades,
Yes, the grenades are happening.
Our Patreon's there. If you would like to support us, please do so. If you wouldn't, that's fine too. Last but not least, we have Denver Death Fest. The final lineup is out. Thank you to everyone that's been a part of this so far, all our sponsors, of course. Swinging News Productions, Zach, thank you very much for all that you've done. We're pretty excited. April 20th through the 22nd in Denver, Colorado, we will be putting on our first ever Death Fest.
I am pitching a tent. I don't know about you.
Oh, you don't have to tell us every time that happens.
No, I mean I'm camping, you asshole.
Okay, all right.
Super
Just
cool.
kidding, I meant I had a boner.
I was going to call the cops if you were out there in a tent anyway.
1 day for $25, 2 days for $45, and 3 days for $60. Fucking, are you kidding me? That's pretty much a steal. They had $20 a day to come out and party with Thralls of Metal and a bunch of cool bands and our awesome sponsors. I think it sounds like a great idea.
It will be a great idea.
Hit up DenverDeathFest.com, take a look around. If you like what you see, maybe buy a ticket. Maybe come out and join us. Maybe come out and have a beer. Maybe come out and have some of other Colorado's finest things that they offer. But most of all, have a good time.
They just may. What do you say? We'll lay on the bay in some hay.
They just may. What do you say?
I think this ending is in disarray. And on that, thank you all very much once again, and we will catch you later.